Is Turkey becoming a puzzle wrapped in an enigma? What is its long-term vision apart from make Turkey great again? It likes to keep us guessing, but for how long? Indefinitely? President Erdoğan is a canny operator, but is he flirting with the wrong side? Join me and Darasz for How We Got Here.
Thanks to its neutrality, Turkey emerged from World War II unscathed, although with a baggage of financial woes. In the 1940s and early 1950s, Turkey made a precautionary move to build up its military, which pushed the country into economic stagnation. But it was precisely Turkey's military might and pivotal geography that tempted NATO to invite Ankara to join the alliance. Joining NATO in 1952 opened the Turkish market to Western investors, mainly from the US, West Germany, France and Italy. The exceptional benefits Turkey brings into the alliance have often emboldened Ankara to pursue independent and audacious regional policies. In July 1974, responding to the Greek junta-sponsored Cypriot coup d'etat, the Turkish military captured the northern part of the island, leaving it split into two spheres of influence. Disagreements between Ankara and the US, the driving force within the alliance, resurged last decade. Citing a violation of NATO rules, Turkey objected in 2017 to the US delivering weapons to the People's Defense Units, a Kurdish militant group Ankara sees as a terrorist organization. While former negotiations for Turkey's full EU membership began in 2005, accession talks had been progressing slowly until they drew to a halt in May 2016. By that time, only 16 of the 35 chapters required to complete the accession process had been opened, with just one closed. The EU has criticised Turkey over alleged human rights abuses and the rule of law issues. In 2017, EU officials argued that Turkey's constitutional referendum held that year, with strengthened presidential powers, conflicted with the Copenhagen criteria, rules defining EU membership eligibility. Finally, in February 2019, a European Parliament committee voted to suspend accession talks, prompting strong criticism from the Turkish government. But Turkey's ambitions do not end at NATO or the EU memberships. Just last month, according to information leaked from the Kremlin, Ankara had applied to join BRICS, a group made up of southern powers like India and South Africa, as well as Washington's enemies, Russia, China and Iran. This week, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan attended the BRICS 2024 summit in the Russian city of Kazan, alongside other leaders of the Global South, hosted by Russian President Vladimir Putin. And much like with its NATO accession in 1952, what Turkey is now seeking in its bid to join BRICS are all the economic boons it could reap from cooperation with over 30 Global South nations that have voiced interest in joining the bloc.
I'm joined today by Adam Michalski, a research fellow at the Department for Turkey, Caucasus and Central Asia at the Centre for Eastern Studies here in Warsaw. Welcome to the programme.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to deal with this notion of Turkey and BRICS. Is it a realistic option, or is it just something that we've talked about Turkey before and it likes a posture? Is it another posturing by President Erdoğan and Turkey?
Well, I'd make the argument that, first of all, we have to understand what Ankara's goals in foreign policy in general are. I mean, Ankara has been, for the last couple of years, conducting a foreign policy that's been very expansive, that's been dealing not only with its Western partners, but has a very kind of visible shift also towards the East, particularly when we see Russia, when we see the engagement in Central Asia, Africa. And so Turkey's ambitions have grown to become a global player, not any longer just just a Western partner, but also an autonomous partner that is capable of conducting its foreign policy and relations with a plethora of states. And that, of course, includes the controversial states like Russia, China. And so if we position this whole idea of Turkey's membership in BRICS from this perspective, what Ankara is essentially trying to do from its own perspective, its own interest pool, is to join BRICS so that it can have a say at a forum that is different from the forums it right now is when it comes to its Western partners. I mean, we're talking about NATO, talking about relations with the EU, and at the same time have this ability to use BRICS as a way of having a say in Central Asia, in Africa, where, of course, we have China. In Central Asia, we have Russia. And we have other bigger players where, you know, if Turkey has the ability to discuss with them its ideas, its goals, then they have another channel of communication created between them. Something that Turkey right now has been, for example, lacking when it comes to its relations with China. I mean, it shares a huge swath of land between it and China itself, Central Asia, the Caucasus, where obviously Chinese interests are present, particularly when it comes to transportation and economics. But Turkey hasn't had really much to say when it came to Beijing's foreign policy over there and economic policy. So I think that BRICS, in terms of that, is once again a really good tool for Turkey to enter into more advanced and sophisticated and, first of all, more recurrent forms of discussion on these type of topics, which Turkey is very much interested in.
We see Turkey as the kind of problem child of the West, and but it's a rational move for Turkey to make. We can't push states we don't like into some sort of outer space.
I mean, it's definitely a controversial move that Turkey is making, but from Ankara's perspective, they tend to argument it that, well, you know, they've tried to enter the European Union, but they've been held back for many, many years. Yes. So right now they're turning to BRICS. However, the West shouldn't necessarily understand it as an anti-Western move, as Turkey turning its back on the West. And so this is something that even Mr. Erdoğan has said it very clearly himself, that Turkey in no way is trying to substitute its relations with the West. Rather, what it's trying to do is it's trying to kind of expand its options, its cards on the table that it can play. And obviously, you know, Turkey does understand, Ankara does understand that relying on China and Russia as perhaps genuine alternatives for what it has when it comes to trade and, you know, with Brussels, with the European Union and Washington is not an option, right? But because, as I've mentioned, you know, these countries are interested or have similar arenas of either cooperation or rivalry, whether it's in the Middle East, Africa, or Central Asia. It's really good for Turkey to be able to have a direct line of communication with the leaders of these states and meet on a recurrent basis that really kind of provides this forum, a forum on which, you know, a lot of these issues or a lot of common, perhaps joint tasks can be discussed. But as I would say, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call BRICS a totally constructive forum where, you know, big ideas and big game-changing moves are being made in the world, in part because I have a feeling that they're still very much disunited amongst themselves. I mean, this is something that we shouldn't be necessarily worried about, in part because, I mean, when you look at both of all these actors and states which are right now within the club, Russia, China, perhaps Turkey at some point, each of them have various degrees of enmity and amity when it comes to the West. They have divergent economies, the way how they work. China is, for example, very much bound to the West. Russia is essentially an island that can operate without any relations. Turkey's kind of in between. Each of them have different sentiments when it comes to the West. Turkey obviously is an ally of the West, and there's no disputing that, even if it's controversial. Russia is an adversary, and so imagine all these actors sitting in one table, what type of frictions that might create.
That was going to be my next question. You probably need to be an Erdoğan kind of figure to compete with people like Modi, Putin, Xi Jinping.
Yeah, and I think that Erdoğan would be more than willing to show himself as the only one capable of talking to Mr. Modi, to Mr. Putin, and at the same time, you know, going for a summit in Washington or in Brussels to discuss its relations with the West, and at the same time positioning itself as this kind of mediator, this country that links the East and the West, and as a result has a foreign policy that oftentimes means that it's balancing its relations, that it cannot completely completely stand on the west side when it comes to some issues, and it cannot be obviously bound strictly to the east. And this is kind of an image that I think Erdoğan has been presenting very vividly since the beginning of the war in Ukraine, where Turkey has this kind of middle ground when it comes to the conflict. I mean, on the one hand, it supports Ukraine, it delivers weapons, it doesn't block any type of NATO or Western type of support that goes over there. On the other hand, it doesn't impose sanctions on Russia, so it meets with Mr. Putin in Sochi. I think Erdoğan has already met Mr. Putin twice, and this will be, I think, his third time he'll be meeting or speaking directly to Mr. Putin since the war. So this is, I think, BRICS. Looking at BRICS as this kind of format, I think it really complements. It kind of fills in the gaps that Turkey right now has when it comes to its Eastern policy and kind of engaging with the rest of the world that so far has been kind of harder for Turkey to enter.
It seems obvious that we should treat Turkey as a serious regional and potential world power. Is this striking home in the European capitals? You mentioned before this seemingly eternal negotiation about EU accession, 20 years, 30 years. We don't seem to take Turkey seriously enough.
Well, that is something that I think many people in Ankara would agree with. That is precisely what's been happening. That for many years and decades, Turkey has been treated as this kind of player who you could perhaps, I don't know, go with a bag of money when you had a refugee crisis and stop it. Or you could ask Turkey to, fix its human rights and democracy, shouting out, of course, that you will not be able to join the European Union otherwise, and we will not be able to, help you out financially or stuff like that. And so Turkey has been receiving, at least from Ankara's point of view, nothing more but sticks instead of carrots when it came to joining or becoming even more integrated to the West. And of course, it isn't just the West's fault. I mean, there has been a lot of changes happening in Turkey under President Erdoğan, and so I think both sides are very much responsible for this situation. But I mean, going back to your point, Turkey considers itself today to be a far greater power and a far more important player than looking back ahead at 10 or 15 years ago, and it wants to be treated with some form of respect and with some form of importance, which right now I think some member states in the European Union are realizing, given Turkey's strategic position with regards to the war in Ukraine, right now the Middle East and the potential, migration, refugee crisis that's brewing over there. So I think that Ankara and a lot of the Western players are waking up to the fact that Turkey might be a hard, controversial partner. Erdoğan might not be the preferred leader of Turkey, but the reality is that Turkey's here, Erdoğan is here, and we are very much bound together by forms of by alliances like NATO, and we have to work together, right? And at the same time, treat Turkey in such a way that, I think makes everybody happy. I mean, Turkey is today a far more important player than it was 10, 15 years, and Ankara cannot just be ignored by the West when it comes to any type of issue or bigger conflict, particularly that it just so happens all the conflicts are right around Turkey.
Yes, right in
and
the
Turkey's right in the center of it.
How do you see the Turkish foreign policy, political landscape changing post-Erdoğan? Is it going to be a policy of continuation?
Well, I'd say that this is, of course, one of the biggest debates that I think one could speculate about, what happens after Erdoğan. I mean, I wouldn't see Turkey necessarily, of course, it depends on what's going to happen on the political stage. Are we going to see a dramatic shift for the opposition? But assuming that the power transition happens and perhaps another person is elected within the current ruling party to lead Turkey, and perhaps is in some way, at least in a fraction, just as much as charismatic as President Erdoğan, I'd see much more continuation in this foreign policy. I mean, I think that in general, Turkey has come to its conclusion that, it's no longer this kind of puppet of the West, this kind of small addition to the West, that it has its own foreign policy, it has its own gravity. And that speaks not only for the current ruling party, but even for the opposition, which views itself very much in line with the current president and the current government. So I wouldn't see in terms of foreign policy a radical change. Of course, when it comes to domestic politics, that's where we would see obviously some bigger changes, in part because of all the conflicts that were happening inside Turkey for the last decade.
Well, that's right. There's final question to you. There's a conflict between President Erdoğan's vision of what Turkey should be and a Islamic vision. Gulen, his chief rival or arch enemy, however we want to call him, died recently. Is this likely going to be a feature of the Turkish political scene?
This might be a feature. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's going to be the most exposed topic, in part because I think that the current opposition has also realized that creating a secular republic that everybody has been trying to create for the last 100 years hasn't really worked out fully. In fact, it's only brought, autocrats to power, which is no good. So I don't think that they're going to necessarily politicize religion as much as obviously they will try to, the opposition, bring back some form of secularism back into the country. I think that much more than anything, they'll try to bring justice when it comes to the current ruling party and putting those people behind bars, which should have been which should find justice this way. Obviously, we have things like the unresolved Kurdish issue that has been going on since the foundation of the republic. So there is, I think, a lot of topics which are going to carry over, and a lot of these, I think, dilemmas have not been solved in any way under Erdoğan, and I don't think that they will be solved even under new governments if such an option was to come into place. So I think...
Adam Michalski, we have to stop there, unfortunately. Fascinating discussion. Thanks very much for coming into the programme.
Thank you very much.
So that's all we have time for today. Do join us next time for How We Got Here.